Yes.
Are you suggesting someone with a fraternity is involved here?
Well, let's talk about that. So initially I said a mile, right?
Yes.
Okay, then you said, that's a
long
distance,
long way,
right?
a mile. Yeah.
So necessarily when you look out of the back of that house, are there other windows that people occupy, rooms that people occupy back in that area that have a direct line of sight for those windows? Sure there are.
Right.
Okay. So it's not unheard of today, and we see this with our own cell phones. It's not unheard of today to be able to amplify and magnify with a telephoto lens at some distance. When I was in the Bureau, we had actual reverse, it was a lens that you look through this way, it hit a mirror, it's called reflective, and it hit back here into a concave area, and you could intensify over a mile, really see something. You could read business cards at probably less than a mile in optimal conditions, because heat and weather, controls some of that, because it makes the light variable, and doesn't appear to be stable. My point is, you get on Amazon and you order a good lens, right? You order a really expensive pair of binoculars. You order a lens, and then today you can just download everything to a hard drive, right?
So let's say someone was spying on them. So what? How's that make someone a murderer?
Right. Okay, so what we see in sex offender cases, and remember I taught this, is that people become interested in the opposite sex. And we know that men, at least when I was teaching, were much more visually stimulated. Women tend to be stimulated in a different way. They read stories versus looking at images. There's a difference. So you look out in that area behind the house, and I could be wrong about this, but you look out in the area behind the house and you know that there's probably some visual stimulation occurring inside those two floors, right? Okay. That's my view. And I happen to know from having taught this that voyeurs can get in a virtual relationship with someone at a distance. I mean, it's not unusual to have a voyeur, which is beginning down the path to other offenses, sexual offenses, climb an 80-foot tree and sit in it for hours to wait for somebody to come to a window. Now, you would think, it's crazy. People wouldn't do that. But I'm telling you, they do. And the motivation for that visual stimulation is something that theorists and psychologists have looked at for many, many decades. And the reason there's so much energy put into this is not like raking a yard, okay? Because there's no biologic function raking the yard, okay? But if you're stimulating yourself sexually, there is a biologic imperative to do this. So you couple those two, the tendency to want to see visual stimulation along with a biologic need, and you amplify the energy. And we see this in all the sexual serial killers. I mean, they are into that sort of thing, and they magnify all their living energy into that, and that's why they get so good at it.
So you don't think there's a rejection involved here? You think this person, in your theory, never even met these girls?
Not directly, no. I could make an argument both ways.
Because I would think my first guess is, you get rejected, or you're somehow you can't connect with them, and you're upset about it.
Right, and they tell you bug off. I don't want anything to do with
That's right, which I'm used to. And you want revenge, right? That guy wants revenge, and he's going to make them pay. But right. You're suggesting that's not necessarily the case here.
Right. That is a possibility, to be sure, right? Because they have attractive women who are always trying to run off a guy who's hitting on them. I get that, okay? And that's certainly possibly a part of this equation.
Or I could give you a theory that the women have boyfriends and the guy's jealous, and he's like, they're with these type of guys, they would never think of someone like me, and they start going through all these mental gymnastics in their head.
Right. With the overall objective of what?
The objective is if they can't be with me, they're going to be with no one.
No, the objective is to get access to the girl, right?
Okay.
I mean, that's the reason it's a biologic imperative. Either way, it's a biologic imperative.
Or they think they do have access to the girl through these binoculars, let's say, and they see other guys, and like that guy's infringing upon their access now, and there's jealousy.
Sure.
Without them even knowing this other guy exists.
That's
in this theory.
In this theory. Okay. So let's look at it a little bit further. We know that it is the one gal who is getting ready to leave. In fact, all of her items are sitting around in boxes because she's going to leave. Okay?
She's moving out.
She's moving out.
Oh.
This is the best girlfriend to Maddie on the top floor. Madeline, okay? And she is getting ready to leave. She is also the victim in this case, and I'm intentionally not using names because I think that's imprudent. But those two girls are in the same bedroom because her bedroom may not even have a mattress in it, may not have a bed because she's getting ready to leave, right?
Where's she going?
She's just leaving to go away and do other things.
She's moving out?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
she's moving out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's moving out. So she's staying in this bedroom on the top third floor. Okay? That victim is the one who information is suggesting now had the most brutal wounds. Okay? We don't know whether the individual sliced from her throat to quit her from communicating. But I will simply tell you that the concept, and let me give you an example. I handled a homicide in the Atlanta Penitentiary where a young girl went in and she was helping the inmates with their nutrition. And that's what she was doing. And she was like a volunteer CNA, a person who would come in and sit down with the inmates and say, well, what is your meal like? And those sorts of things. So this young girl, who was 21 years of age, this was right before Thanksgiving. And she was there helping this one fellow. Well, this one fellow had what's known as a shiv. And that shiv is a manufactured knife out of a bed spring or a mail bag where they grind it down and make it reasonably sharp, but not very sharp. So he's in there with her. The door is closed. In the room right next to her, where she's providing this information to inmates, are the doctors, because it's in the infirmary. Mm-hmm. So the inmate, and I know this because this is what the inmate said after he killed her. He said, all right, now I've got to kill you.
Why?
All right, because he tried to rape her unsuccessfully, right? Got her down on the floor. When he pulled down her stockings, pantyhose, it was so swift that he actually encapsulated her shoes, which were short-heeled pumps, right? And he tried to rape her, but as with many rapists, they're not able to achieve an erection or an ejaculation because they have a problem with that. That's part of the problem. And so he was not able to do that, but it was evident what he intended to do, and he'd be charged with the same thing. So he said, I've got to kill you now. So did she holler and shout, help, help, help? No.
No. Why not?
I don't know. But I'm just telling you, there's an example of someone who did not cry out. Okay? So, when I attended the autopsy, the injection of adrenaline, which you occasionally do to restart the heart, missed by about a centimeter. So people don't always holler out. It's not like in Hollywood where you see a movie and someone's hollering and going on. That's to get you as the viewer's attention that something horrible's happened, but it's not always the case that people shout out. So here's the point. She's going to leave. The one gal's going to leave. The other girl's staying. They're best friends. She gets really, really severely injured. Now, why did that happen? If it's true that she was targeted alone, she's certainly in a window constantly that plays to the back, and she's going to leave. Another point is that it's starting to snow. Now that may seem like a minor event, but frankly, when there's a heavy snow on the ground, or any snow for that matter, you can see very easily where people walk, right? Well, that's not true if there's no snow. So perhaps that was part of the trigger. She's leaving, it's starting to snow, and as a result, this individual who's in a virtual relationship as a voyeur is upset because he can see that she's going to leave. She's packing all her stuff up, right?
So
even if he doesn't know from information being passed around the neighborhood.
So we're assuming he in all this.
Absolutely. There's no question.
No question.
No. One of the injuries to this young woman was her liver was cut open. Now, in my mind, that tells me it's somebody powerful. Okay, now you don't have to penetrate the abdomen too much to slice a liver, but of course, that shows a level of sophistication that the intent was not to injure or frighten these people, it was to kill them.
So how is this investigation falling short?
Well, all right, that area, that hillock right behind the house, was never adequately searched. And how do you adequately search it? Well, the way you search it is you go in, okay? First off, you cover all these areas. And we've seen this. At weddings, you frequently see the white tents. At crime scene investigations, you frequently see the white tents over the ground. It's there to preserve evidence because evidence is transitory, right? Something happens, it blows away, it gets covered up by something else. When you drive your patrol car up on the front, you may be destroying evidence and you're not aware of it. So the thing to do is to cover those areas to prevent the weather from getting to them. So you've separated all your witnesses out that you have. You've individually interviewed them, so you've got a good detail on what they believe happened individually, and you can aggregate that to see which facts are good and which facts are bad. But they didn't do that. And then the investigation didn't encompass that hillock right behind the house. And clearly, that was the simplest way into the house. If you didn't know the code of the front door, then it's very simple to go. If that sliding glass door is opened or jammed or whatever, you go in right there. And if you look, somebody put evidence tape right on that, which you would never do. Because if you put the tape down, that's how you lift prints. Now, today it's slightly different, but when we used to lift prints, you take a brush, you take your print powder, and you dust looking for it. So if you put tape, and to preserve it, you take a white card, you take tape, you put over the fingerprint, and you take it off and you put it right on there in the back of the card. You write location, time, and information. Now, probably they can do it with cameras now and some sort of ultraviolet lighting, but the point is you never put tape on it because you ruin it.
Do you feel we're going to get a criminal? Do you think we're going to get an arrest here at some point?
I do.
You do?
I do.
Despite all the mistakes?
I do. I think we're going to get an arrest. The question is, can you get a conviction? But let me step back to how do you analyze that area on the hillock? You cover it, and then you take every bit of that ground. You search it with a metal detector, and you search it with a rake, and then you get all that material up, and you strain it much like archaeologists do. Because you're looking for, here's what you're looking for. You're looking for a wallet, car keys.
A ring.
Yeah, a ring, a cell phone, all that kind of thing.
Any identifying piece
Sure.
of evidence.
Well, I've often handled burglaries where you find the burglar's wallet in the house that he burglarized. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but that's the kind of evidence. So when you teach evidence investigation, you gotta protect yourself first. That's the first thing. So you make sure the bad guy's not there. The second thing you do is you protect the scene, right? You identify evidence, you protect evidence, and then you collect evidence. That's how that stream works. And so you can see that that's what has to be done. And in a house where there many people are constantly, and it's a place where there's going to be a lot of DNA and those kinds of things, how do you find the freshest DNA? Well, there's an answer to that.
What's the answer?
If the heater's on, snowing, cool, heat on, where do you think the friable material goes?
Into the vent.
Into the filter.
It's close.
That's right.
That was
close. That's close.
Yeah,
so you take the filter out. You've got the friable means that it's broken down into small particles. When you have someone knifing somebody else, you're going to have that.
Particles are going to...
That's exactly right. Now, the theory is that this individual cut himself. I don't necessarily buy that. Now, in a normal knife attack, one person, a fight in the street, maybe. But I don't think that happened here. I think this individual had some specific training. And it's not unusual, just let me tell you, it's not unusual to have individuals who train with knives. We see this frequently with incarcerated prisoners because that's the only way they can defend themselves. And they can hurt you instantly. And I have seen this happen over the years. I handled in Miami years ago one brother killing another brother with a kitchen knife. And it was a horrific thing that I actually saw through the windshield of my car as I was responding to the scene. So these things happen instantly. They're bloody. And it's not something that takes a long period of time. And remember this, to kill one person with a knife in the middle of the night argues that they knew the person. Most murders are done by people who are known to one another. And you come into the room, you stab them in the neck, or you stab them, if you were a reader of novels, you stab them in the heart. But of course, people moving around, it's dark, arguably. We don't know today whether the lights were on or off in that room. But clearly you had to have some night vision gear or a light. And you don't want night vision gear that's going to poke all over the walls and out the windows, right?
Right.
So the accessibility of nighttime equipment is available now, night vision gear.
So the way you describe this, it's fairly sophisticated. You're looking at surveillance equipment, night vision gear.
Perhaps.
This wasn't just some schmo who just decided on a whim to do it, in your mind.
In my mind. And when we think about it further, I mean, he killed 4 people, okay? And really, in my mind, it's 2 murders, right? It's 2 murders here, 1 murder here with both these individuals, and then another murder up here. And they were created simultaneously. I mean, not simultaneously, but those 2 people were killed together, and then the other 2 people were killed together. And clearly there was some preparation, some planning that went into this.
I will venture to guess this. We are in Idaho here. There's a lot of hunting. So this could be somebody with experience with hunting, using equipment to hunt deer, bears, any other kind of animals.
I think that's true. I mean, people are not aware of this, but they hunt hogs with spears here in Florida. I mean, that's an example of the use of a knife to slaughter what ordinarily would be a dangerous animal.
This could be an outdoorsman.
It could be.
Who has experience.
It could be, but it's someone familiar with the use of a knife. And I think that lends itself toward a military history, which was true with Danny Rowling. Danny was, there for PTSD in Gainesville. So, I mean, that's certainly a possibility. But what you're going to do is you're going to look for recent releases from prison of inmates who practice with knives, and you're going to look for individuals who are seeking medical care for PTSD or other things of that nature. So,
and maybe surveillance video of people who've come and gone from the premises in the past week.
Well, that's right. But there's very little. There's a dearth of video.
Or you go through their phone records and you see in their emails and text messages and see who they've been in contact with.
Well, you'd absolutely
any
do that.
kind of problems that are arisen in the communications.
Right. Yeah, you would look at that. But this individual did something that is reasonably unheard of, which is to kill 2 sets of people, 4 people, at night, early in the morning. Everybody's asleep, apparently, and then evaporates. How does that happen? I mean, this is not something
So
that...
someone who's trained.
It's someone who knows what they're doing. There's no question in my mind about that.
They knew their way out, and they knew how to get it done and done quickly.
Yeah, that's right. And get away, and without detection. And I will tell you that being able to do that series of things effectively argues for some extreme training. And the other odd thing about this from my perspective, knifing people, is that a replacement for sexually violating them? Well, possibly. It's a knife, it's poking into them. But I don't see this as a serial sexual killer. I mean, he doesn't reach the level of a anger excitation rapist, which is a category where somebody goes in, they're a disorganized killer, and they just kill somebody and they're not concerned about being caught. This is somebody who, with stealth, eliminated the lives of 4 people and was able to simply vanish. And that, in my mind, requires a lot of preparation and a lot of skill. It's not something that another student did, in my mind, but somebody who has a military or at least a hunting background.
Would you try to suffocate them or tie them up before doing it? Would that be a simpler, better way, so to speak, for them in this type of instance?
Well, if it were sexual, you would expect him to lasso one of them out of the group and sexually molest them. That's not what we see here, which leads me back to the thought that maybe they knew something or thought something that they shouldn't have, and they were targeted directly. But then we get back to the idea the back of that house is just open for view from the outside for not a week, not a month, but for a long period of time. And these are college students. They're living in a reasonably secure area, and there's locks on the doors. They feel safe in their bedrooms, and it's a horrible thing that women have to worry about someone who is a deviant being somewhere in the world watching them. But I can tell you this, women generally, and I taught this for the FBI, women generally are afraid when they go out and it's dark. They are worried about anybody approaching them. Whereas men typically are not that way. We are out and abroad at night, and we're not particularly worried about people coming up on us when we're young. You get older, you got to pay a little more attention.
Okay, so let's go now towards the conclusion here. And I asked you this previously, and let's come back to it. Do you think we'll see an arrest? And if we will, when do you think we'll see it? And then will we get a conviction?
Right. The conviction is pretty likely. I mean, I don't think there's any place in America that you could have a defendant that people didn't know about this. And here's the other problem.
Enough evidence too, right? Again, if the scene and the evidence has been tainted, would the right defense attorney be able to somehow get it thrown out?
Well, first off, we've got to. You're arguing that the evidence would be tainted.
Possibly.
Possibly. Yeah. But they now have evidence. They may have blood from the individual who was there. Remember this: when you enter a crime scene or a scene, you enter a room, you're sloughing off DNA. You're sloughing it off, whether you want to or not. And when you leave, you're carrying some evidence of that room, that location with you when you leave. So you bring evidence and you take evidence with you. So my point is simply this. They may have sufficient evidence to determine a given individual is in that room.
If they're able to make an arrest, what's going to be the one thing that's going to help them bring this man?
A confession.
Confession.
I mean, that's always the solution, right?
But the evidence, what piece of evidence do you think is going to be able to tie them to this?
All right, if you could find the weapon that was used and it's got layers of blood on it, I don't know, but sometimes these individuals will take a trophy. They'll cut off a piece of something, particularly that's not unusual in women killings, where they cut off things that they want to use to remember and relive the circumstances. So if they found any of that evidence, clearly that connects the person. But absent that, then you're going to be relying on, there was apparently some defense struggle. And that means that nails, scrapings are going to have potential DNA on them, things of that nature, depending on how well prepared the individual was. Now, if they were well prepared, it's cold. They're going to be wearing a mask. It's difficult to scratch somebody. You wear gloves. I mean, there are all sorts of precautions that a bad criminal can take to avoid being connected with the crime.
You would think 4 women who are attacked would have some sort of evidence under their nails in the process of this going down.
To the extent that they were aware of what was transpiring.
And maybe they weren't.
Well, they were laying in a bed asleep
Right.
when somebody starts knifing them. And the knifing doesn't make a lot of noise. It's certainly scuffling and makes noise. But as I pointed out earlier, simply because you're attacked and knifed doesn't mean you're going to shout out. I mean, you may be dreaming for all you know.
You may never wake up.
Well, that's exactly what apparently happened to some of these. So all of this ultimately will depend on putting the evidence together. In the Wayne Williams trial, we didn't have any of that DNA evidence before all of that happened, right? This is back in 79 and the early 80s when all of these things transpired. And so what we did was we put together hairs and fiber analysis. So he had a car, he had a house with a rug in it, he had this, he had that, and pretty soon you got 23 different fibers and analysis that are on the victims that likely came from Wayne Williams' environment. Again, that's that microscopic evidence. So you would try to manage the case by putting this together. One of the problems that we've seen is the pressure from the media to get information, the pressure from the family to get information probably is deleterious to the overall operations of investigating a crime of this nature, simply because when you're interviewing people, trying to identify a suspect, you've now given away the fact that the one girl's liver was cut open. Well, if I say to you, I did this, bad confession, and I don't know that I cut the liver open, then I can eliminate that person, right? They're not really the person. But today with DNA, we have a better and better chance to identify who the killer actually was. But that takes time. And it also takes some example to compare it to. Now they do it through extended family alleles now, where you can actually see that somebody in that family group is connected. And that's when you find that the one person, the uncle, the son has some mental problems or has some sexual perversion, and then you can connect the dots.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for the educating, enlightening, and informing.
My pleasure.
And we'll see how it all plays out.
We will.
Hope you enjoyed.